Hello and welcome to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett. I'm joined by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks.
Hey, Stephen, how are you today?
I'm good. We're here. We're doing a show about intelligence. I'm a real person,
Apple
though. Don't be
Intelligence.
tricked. Okay.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
the
Are
code
you
word.
sure? Are you sure?
Yes, the code word is performa. So
I thought your code word would be Tacoma, but
could be.
Performa works too.
They do kind of rhyme.
Yeah. There you go. How about a Tacoma with a Performa inside it?
I mean, I can go do that literally right now. Like,
Why don't you? Let's just take a break.
I've got. Hang on, I think I got 4 performas in the office right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe a 5th on the way. We don't have to talk about this.
The Mac we all love to hate, Performa.
That's right. Yeah, Performa month still going strong at 512 pixels. Go read thousands of words about a computer people wish we could all forget.
All right, I want to get into the main topic today because it's really interesting. But before we do, if you are a More Power User subscriber, make sure to stick around. I did an experiment in the Mac Sparky Labs where I wrote an Apple script with ChatGPT, and it worked out pretty good. I'm going to share a video with you guys and kind of walk through it in the More Power Users section. And if you don't know what More Power Users is, it's the ad-free extended version of the show you can get over at relay.fm/MPU. Helps pay for our shoes, keeps the show going, and you get a little extra. So that's what we're going to do today. But the topic today is Apple Intelligence. And before we even get into what's going on here, Apple has 2 separate beta tracks here in August of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Super weird, right? Usually about this time of year, we are running betas of the operating system will release with a new phone, which like clockwork comes out every year in August. I'm sorry, September. I misspoke. Comes out every September. And we're all talking about it. Usually all the excitement's over. These betas toward the end are when the battery starts getting better and they start, screwing everything down and tightening the bolts. But this year, Apple said, well, guess what, gang? We're also going to have a 0.1 beta. And if you really want to, go out on the edge of your skis, go ahead and install that one for the operating system that hasn't been released publicly yet. And you can get some pieces of the Apple Intelligence. So Stephen and I, being Mac Power users, installed it on all our devices, right?
Yeah. So I have 18.1 on my Carry iPhone and my iPad, and I have Sonoma 15. I cannot keep up with the macOS numbers. Whatever Sonoma 0.1 is on a MacBook Air. And I will say, like, if you're in development land, like I am now as well, there's some differences between 18.0 beta 6 and 18.1 beta 2 beyond just the Apple Intelligence stuff. So my beta phone, I've kept on the 18.0 track because that will ship to some number of customers. Yeah. But it's super weird because Apple also hasn't been clear about what's going to ship when. Like phones from the factory, I think will have 18. Like I don't think 18.1 is going to be available to anyone in September. I think it will come later. But
yeah, definitely.
But here we are. It's in beta. It's very messy this year. Very messy.
Well, it's interesting because like they're rolling new features into 18.0 beta, 18.0, sorry. And then 18.1 doesn't have those features, but now 18.1 beta 2 came out and they added some of the features like that new distraction mode in Safari is now in it. But there's like different features in different versions. So it's kind of nutty, but that's not the point of today's show. The big news of 18.1 and all these 0.1s is that Apple has enabled some portions of Apple Intelligence. Steve and I have been kicking the tires. And we want to talk about what's going on, where it is now. I'm sure a lot of you listening are not going to be putting these 0.1 betas or don't have developer accounts. So this gives us a chance to kind of bring you up to speed on what's going on. But why don't we start a little generally about Apple Intelligence and what the dream is?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. I mean, I really think Apple's pitching this as kind of AI for the rest of us. I stole your valor. You wrote that in the document, but it's
I stole it from Craig Federighi.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
there's a lot of these tools out there, and they're sort of scattershot, right? Like you can kind of put these things together across various services, paying different things for different services. But Apple, I think in line with kind of their MO, they're taking technology that's out there in the market and they're bringing it on device in a way that mere mortals can use it. And they have their own flavor of those things, right? Some of their tools, as we get into, aren't as good as what's out there on the market. Some are less interesting than what's out there on the market. But Apple is kind of distilling down, figuring out what they think their users actually want. And it's like this collection of sort of overlapping related features that are all baked in, right? That they're in, like some of the writing tools, they're just in your text field, right? You don't have to go another place. And of course, Apple can do that because they own the platform.
Yeah, and there's a couple points on that. I mean, the first one is there are very powerful AI tools. I mean, in the more power users, I'm going to talk about one writing Apple script for me. Apple's not aiming for that. I mean, their idea of AI is let's make the experience better for users. They're not necessarily thinking of power users here, and that is good and bad, right? I think there's a lot of people who have no interest in Chat GPT, but will love some of the features we're going to talk about in today's show. Then for those of us out more on the edge, we're going to miss some of this stuff, but fortunately they have an answer for you on that as well. Like Stephen was saying, an interesting bit of this is a common theme with Apple where they make a name of something. And I'll think of, let's use iCloud as an example. iCloud is not a single product or service, right?
Mm-hmm.
iCloud syncs your contacts, and it's a different thing that syncs files, and it's a different thing that holds a bunch of your personal information in your keychain. It's a generic name they use for a collection of services. And this is just one more of those. And they're calling it Apple Intelligence. And certain components of it are in this beta and certain aren't. But they are getting some of it out. And kind of an overarching, I think, problem Apple faces. Wall Street started to lose its mind because they went AI crazy. Like they're putting bunches of money in companies that do AI, whether or not they have a product. And they're looking at big companies saying, what's your AI strategy? And Apple always keeps all this stuff secret. So I feel like Apple kind of jumped out earlier than it wanted to with these announcements.
Definitely.
As a result, they're scrambling to get these features in. And part of it is, in WWC, I don't think they made it clear, but it implied at least that some of this was going to be in the 0.0 release. But then they said, no, the first time you're going to get it is 0.1, but then they moved the 0.1s up because I feel like they are trying to satisfy fancy business people at the same time that they roll all this out.
Yeah, and I think you have to look no further than just the schedule, right? That this is going to be in beta when it comes out. Some of it, I truly believe, will not be here even in this calendar year. That's unusual for Apple, right? They like to say, "Hey, we did a thing. Here's the thing," right? And kind of have a complete feature or set of features all at once. And it's not the way it is this time. I think also just look at the severe system requirements, particularly on the iPhone, where the only phones that can run this are the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max. And, assuming that will expand this fall with the iPhone 16 line, but that's a really narrow band of devices. And if they had waited a year, that would have been a better story there. But nevertheless, these features are beginning to roll out, and they'll be here when they'll be here. And if you're interested in this stuff, there are lots of other things on the market, right? If you're interested in AI writing tools or image generation, there are other things now that you can go use and can fill those needs for you. So I think that takes a little pressure off Apple, that while on one hand, Wall Street's like, hey, the clock is ticking, but from the user perspective, users aren't stranded until Apple shows up to the party, right? There are other tools out there.
Yeah, and Steve and I both stated our opinion in prior shows that they should not be in a rush with this. Honestly, no. I think they announced it before they wanted to, but if it means they have to wait till 0.2 or 0.3 or 0.6 to get the feature done right, then they should absolutely take as much time as it takes, because What we don't want is like, mobile me 2.0. We don't want them to release something that melts everybody's computers or
Yeah.
just doesn't work. And, Apple Maps, mobile me, Apple has had some of these rushed releases and they get egg on their face that doesn't come off for years. So I think they've learned that lesson. I hope they have. But we're now getting a peek at what they're doing with these point 0.1 betas.
Yeah, that's right. I do want to just briefly touch on Apple's large language model. That's the technology that underlies a lot of these things, and particularly the writing tools, right? Of it has all this knowledge, all these words, it can remix them for you. And there has been no shortage of controversy around how these companies have built those models. OpenAI, Perplexity, all these Apple, all these companies basically trained, which just means basically ingesting all this data and churning on it. In Apple's case on Google TPU systems, they did not use NVIDIA hardware. Most people use NVIDIA hardware, including XAI, which opened a data center 20 minutes from my house here in Memphis, which is wild.
Okay.
Which has led to no shortage of controversy locally, let me tell you. But Apple has taken a lot of heat for this, including from our dear friend Federico Viticci and John Voorhees over at Mac Stories. And we are now seeing these big AI companies making deals with the likes of Vox or Wall Street Journal or whoever to payment is not quite the right word. I mean, they are getting paid, but to quote license this content, even though it was already scraped previously, and to give them access to it in the future. And there's no recourse for the little guys, right? Like I can't show up to Perplexity as like the owner of 512 Pixels and be like, hey, about Performance because I wrote about them and you scraped me. Like that is still a thing that needs to be sorted out. But Apple in particular, I think their reputation and who they are, it makes a starker contrast when they're going around scraping the open web. So like that is a thing that is hard and messy and really complicated. And like, I don't even know clearly how I feel about it, but it's out there, right? It is part of this new world that we live in, that all this information came from somewhere, and the somewhere was the internet, rightly or wrongly.
The problem for small creators like you and me is that if you go to Perplexity and you ask it a question about a performa, it will answer it in Perplexity. And it may put a footnote to your article about it so they can trace through. But for the vast majority of people, they're going to get the answer and then they're going to move on with their day. So you don't get the traffic. So your advertisers tell you, well, you don't have that much traffic, so
Right.
we're going to pay you less. And like the ability to run your website becomes more difficult. And in essence, these engines that are profiting off your content are not, sharing the wealth in any way. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem. And you're right. I don't really know how I feel about it either. The whole thing is messy. But the fact is, it's coming. I think we could probably do a whole show on this, but I think the traditional Google search is dead. Like it's
Probably.
People, I don't know if people realize it yet, but very soon, Google, Perplexity, Search GPT, Chat GPT is working its own search engine. You're going to ask an AI a question. It's going to go to the web. It's going to get the answer and answer it for you, which as a user is a better experience. We talked about it in our AI episode, but there are real consequences for content creators. And I don't know how that all sorts out.
Yeah. Yeah. I just didn't want to go through this episode not touching on that, but today we do want to focus on what Apple has built for its users. And I suspect the rest of that stuff is going to take a long time to figure out. This episode of MPU is brought to you by 1Password. Many of us are in back to school mode now. And if you have students in your household who have devices for the first time, or maybe you've got a student going off to college, it's a great time to get into 1Password for families. There's this new blog post over on 1Password walking through how to set this up. We use 1Password for families here in the Hackett household. My wife and I have a couple of vaults that we share. Of course, we also have our own individual passwords also saved there, right? Some stuff she doesn't need to see of mine and vice versa. But it's really easy to manage permissions on that sort of stuff. And so we now have a new parents and kids vault, and we have some logins that our kids need in there. Really easy to manage, really easy to set who has access to what. So go check out that blog post. With 1Password for Families, you get all the great 1Password features. So log in across any of your devices, secure sync, the ability to store more than just passwords. So driver's licenses, bank account information, secure notes, passport information, which I recently discovered on our trip to the UK last month. All that stuff is in 1Password. All that stuff is in 1Password for Families. So go check it out. You want to go to onepassword.com/MPU. The link is in the show notes, but that link will get you a free 30-day trial. When you sign up, you'll get 20% off. That's onepassword.com/MPU.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about Apple Intelligence mechanics. And some of this we covered after WWC, but we've definitely learned more since then. And I think it's worth covering again. There's really three elements to Apple Intelligence in terms of where is the intelligence, right? Where's the work done? And one of the best parts about Apple Intelligence, in my opinion, is that a lot of it is done on device. And that means that that neural engine that we've been hearing about at Apple keynotes for the last, 7-8 years now, a lot of that's paying off. And artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever you want to label it, is happening on your phone, your Mac, your iPad. And when you ask Apple Intelligence to do something, if it can do it on device, that gives you several benefits. The first is it has access to your data securely because it's not sending it anywhere. It's private. And second, it's fast because it's on your device. I mean, I think in a perfect world, AI would be done on device for everything, but we're not there yet. But Apple has made a real push for this, and I think that's a big part of their vision.
It's such a strength play for Apple that they have, hardware, software, services, but that extends now from the silicon, right? The actual hardware that makes your phone do things all the way up through this AI stack. And being able to integrate all of that at every level really sets Apple apart. I mean, even Google with Android, and we're recording this the day that there's the Pixel event. And even with the Pixel and Android, Google is still having to work with partners on some of that design work. And Apple they have partners for manufacturing, but that design work, all of that stuff is in-house. They're planning these things years in advance. And so, yeah, when they first started talking about the neural engine, I was like, I didn't understand what the capabilities would be. And for a long time, I would imagine that hardware was vastly underutilized across sort of the range of Apple devices out there. But now all of a sudden with iOS 18.1 and Sonoma 0.1, which is now now I'm just going to use that language now from now on, Sonoma 0.1.
Yeah.
A lot of that hardware is going to light up in new ways. And I mean, just what a show of what Apple can do there. It's so impressive.
Yeah, it's like it may have been underused in the past, but Saruji and his team are like, all right, kids, light it up, because
exactly.
On-device AI is going to max that neural engine out immediately. And every year that gets better means we get to keep more on device and we get more power on the device. So yeah, but just for context, that's the first level of Apple Intelligence work that's done on device. The second level is one that I did not anticipate, but it was an announcement at WWC. It's called Private Compute Models, PCC. I don't know what's
private cloud compute.
Private cloud compute. There we go. But so Apple has done something truly interesting and something that a company like Apple would only do, right? They have created cloud services to do AI computation entirely built around the idea of we never want to know the user data and we never want to know that you did it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking the best of what they can do privacy wise and applying it to cloud computing. And that is not the way cloud computing is done most of the time. And it plays to their previous strength we talked about, that this hardware and Apple's data servers are actually Apple Silicon based. We don't really know what that looks like. Mark Gurman had a report that it was maybe like the M2 Ultra and some sort of server chassis, or headless, cut open Mac Studios or something. I don't really know. I would love to know if someone wants to tell me
Yeah.
what private
Yeah.
cloud compute hardware looks like. Boy, I would love to know. But they, with Apple Silicon and this hardened operating system they've built, and all of these policies and the way that the chain works from data from your device up to the private cloud and then back down, at every layer, at every step of that transaction, your data is kept safe and secure, not only from outside prying eyes, but from Apple itself, that Apple doesn't know who's doing what on this hardware. And I cannot imagine the undertaking this must have been to build this pipeline end to end. And what it lets them do is it lets them build Apple Intelligence features and use models that don't fit on a phone or even a laptop at this point. And maybe over time the need for this will go down. Like, I could see a future where at some point 5 years from now, Apple says, look, these neural engines are now powerful enough, we're doing all of Apple Intelligence on device. I don't know, Mike, I just don't know. But it is really interesting that they've built this mechanism for however long they need it to offload these things to the cloud, but to basically have the same privacy and security just about that they can offer on device. It's super impressive, and I think it shows Apple really does take the privacy angle seriously.
Yeah. And there's 2 points on that I wanted to make. The first is that the problem with the theory that we won't need them someday is that AI demands are going to only increase over time,
It's
right?
true.
And so as the neural engine gets able to do the stuff we're talking about today, there's going to be even more exotic uses of AI in 5 years. So I feel like there's always going to be kind of this cat and mouse thing going on. But I heard from a person inside Apple once that some very senior executives are very aware of the number of like subpoena and government requests they get, not just from the US, but from around the world, to get user data. And like that is like a point of irritation. And I think Apple really wants to build, I mean, they're serious about this privacy thing. And it's really cool. I think I know I sound like a hippie when I get into these privacy discussions, but I do feel like we should have a right to our data. I think Tim Cook's right. I think privacy is a human right. I don't think government should be able to snoop through our data. It's just like I think about it like in terms of my dad, Korean War vet. If someone told him that the government was going through his mailbox every day and making copies of everything and then putting it back in his mailbox, he would have flipped,
Yeah.
And so I just think it's really good that Apple is doing this, and they have independent verification. So they're letting people see how the sausage is made to confirm that it is indeed private. And they even now are reporting to users. You can, Stephen, in the beta, the 0.1 betas, you can go in to get a privacy and security setting. And there is a setting there for Apple Intelligence Report. Now, I've been using a lot of Apple Intelligence, but my reports often come up blank. I think it's a beta thing, but it will tell you how much it has done and sent up to PCC, I believe, once this thing releases.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. That the reporting doesn't seem to be hooked up, at least yet. But I think that's another important step, that users can understand what features are operated where. I am very curious, and I just don't know the answer to this because we are only on the second beta of these things. What happens if your phone or your device requests private cloud compute and you're offline? Like, how does the software handle that? Does it hide a feature? Right? Like, so say the image generation, which is not in the betas yet. We're going to talk about that more later. Say that requires private cloud compute. I don't know if it does, but just for example, and I'm on the subway or I'm on my iPad and I've, I don't have cellular on and I'm out in the woods. Like that could be a frustrating experience for users if they're used to something being there and then it's not, and Apple has to explain in the moment like what the deal is. So that's something that I'm going to be looking for as these betas continue to improve, of what's the step off like from local to cloud, and is the user even aware of it? If it's not available, what happens? Those are all sort of open questions right now.
Yeah, I agree. And the other big open question is, where's the dividing line? Where does it go from on device to PCC? And Apple hasn't given a real clear answer since WWDC. I think I saw one review where they said it's all about how complex the data being requested is. And so I have a theory. I think it's model based. Like there's different, like we were saying at the beginning of the show, there AI, Apple Intelligence is not just one thing. So like, for instance, if you're going to have it draw a picture of you, like that dumb picture of the superhero mom, maybe that's something that requires PCC level of operation. But if you're going to have it proofread your text, that's easy enough that it can do it on device. It's going to depend on the ask you make, and then it's going to decide. And I think we're going to get a lot more information on that once Apple Intelligence Report starts working. In fact, here's another theory. Both of us are getting 0 results on Apple Intelligence Report, maybe because everything in the 0.1 beta is not on PCC.
Yeah,
maybe that's all on device. And when you look at the list of features, we're going to go over them. I could almost make the argument, yeah, all this stuff could be done on device.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess we'll find out. It's interesting. And then the third piece of this is the large language models. Now, Apple they did create their own LLM, I guess, but not in the traditional sense of ChatGPT. And so they built hooks, and they announced at WWDC they have this handoff to ChatGPT. But we've learned a lot more since then about the deal, right? In fact, at one point we had heard that Apple got a seat on the board for the deal. One of the rumors is that there's no money changing hands, which I think kind of makes sense, right? ChatGPT gets access to all the Apple users, and Apple gets a really powerful LLM for free,
Mm-hmm.
Although the board seat fell apart because of regulatory stuff.
Fear of regulatory stuff, even, which is, that's a weird move from Apple, right? Normally they're kind of middle fingers held high, but
yeah, truth. But yeah, they got a lot going on with regulatory stuff, so maybe they don't want to poke the bear anymore. But we're also learning that this isn't a deal where ChatGPT just got keys to the kingdom on Apple devices. Actually, there are conditions on it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's seen the contract, right? But just from reading interviews and hearing Apple executives talk, I think we're right on the 5 points we assembled into the outline. Number one, they even said this in the keynote, it's anonymized. So when you send data to ChatGPT, it's anonymized, so they don't know who you are. That's not normally the case if you use ChatGPT through the web. Data privacy is turned on by default. With ChatGPT, a normal account, you have to go in and turn data privacy on. I'm not even sure what that means, honestly, since they know so much about you. IP address is hidden, or obfuscated. So in theory, OpenAI won't know where you're coming from when you make the request. And Apple specifically nags you. They tell you, I'm about to send something to ChatGPT. Are you okay with that? And we haven't seen it yet, but as I understand it, that is going to be every time it goes to ChatGPT. It's not going to be like you click OK once and you never see it again.
Yeah, I wonder how frustrating that'll be for people who are going to use the ChatGPT fallback a lot. I wonder if at some point there'll be an option to be like, yeah, always allow.
Yeah. Or like, because they did say you can hook up your account. Like I have a ChatGPT account.
Yeah, same.
And that way you get some additional features, and maybe that will be like, well, if they have an account, we're not going to ask for permission. And then, as I understand, I read one interview where they're talking about handling the request through PCC. So it's going to go through Apple's private servers. So then Apple can basically be the middleman and erase evidence that you did it on the server as it comes through to you. So they'll never be able to know what you requested. I think. I mean, this is early days, gang. We don't have the stuff yet. So
right.
we're putting together all this stuff based on what we read. But it looks to me like Apple went to great extent to make those protections, and they're talking that they want to use other models, and I guarantee you they're going to put the same conditions on them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they would like to have Google and others be options. And I agree with you. I think these rules will be universally applied to those other vendors, and that may make it hard to shop this around. But that'll be a time will tell kind of situation.
But I also feel like Apple, it would be a deal breaker. Like if Google said, well, yeah, we'll give you our engine, but we want the user data, I think they'd say, well, no thanks. At least I'd hope they would say that. But I feel pretty confident they would. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace. Go to squarespace.com/MPU and save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using the code MPU. Squarespace is one of our longest running sponsors on the Mac Power Users, and every time I get to read an ad from them, I smile because Squarespace is where I have got so many interesting projects started on the web. For too long, setting up a website was difficult. It required expensive fees and plugins and a bunch of stuff that I didn't understand or want to learn. That's why I was so happy when I discovered Squarespace, because it gave me an easy way to put anything on the web with Squarespace doing all the hard work for me. Website building tools are there, hosting tools are there, everything you need all in one place, all for a very reasonable price. It is the all-in-one platform that allows you to build a website for your business easily, inexpensively, and effectively. Whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, you can stand out with a beautiful website, engage your audience, and sell anything, your products, services, and even the content you create. One of my favorite things about Squarespace sites is that they're not identifiable as Squarespace sites. There's a lot of these websites that when you use them, people on the outside can tell you're using them because they all kind of look the same. But Squarespace lets you design it around the way you want. Now, they've got built-in professionally designed templates if you want, but you can take any one of those and start modifying it. Best of all, you don't need to be a web programmer to do it. Everything is click buttons and sliders. It's just super easy to make it work the way you want. And getting started couldn't be easier. You can hit the ground running with their Fluid Engine. It's their next generation website editor, and it's never been easier for anyone to unlock their creativity. Choose your website starting point and customize every design detail with reimagined drag and drop technology for desktop or mobile. So stretch your imagination online with the Fluid Engine, including in any new Squarespace site. I've been using Squarespace since the beginning. I still use Squarespace. I just don't think there's anything like it that matches its power and simplicity. So if you need to set up a website or you know somebody that needs to set one up, send them over to squarespace.com/MPU today. When you go there, you get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain, and it makes the show look good, and we appreciate that as well. So like I said, whether it's you or your friends, send them to squarespace.com/MPU. Squarespace.com/MPU is the website. Go check it out. And thank you, Squarespace, for all of your support of the Mac Power Users. Okay, all this dancing, let's talk about the features, right?
Yeah. Yeah, here we are. They're live on our phones. It was one of those moments like, oh, Apple talked about this, and then the beta came out, and I put it on some stuff. I was like, oh, the future is here. Do we want to start with what's going on with Siri?
Sure. I think that's a good entry point. I mean, starting with the UI, right? It now is a ring around the center of the screen, and supposed to have better listening capabilities, and you can correct yourself. Before we get to performance, let's just talk about that new UI. What do you think?
I think it's beautiful. It even shows up on CarPlay, so you hit the button in CarPlay and you get the kind of rainbow shimmeriness around the edges.
Yeah.
I think, not to blur the line to the feature conversation, I think it's a mistake to have the new UI if these new features aren't there. Like if it's the same old Siri, but it looks fancier, like then that seems like a bit of a miss to me. But I like that it's not modal. You know, it used to be way back in the day, Siri took over your whole screen, and then Siri's kind of become a smaller and smaller portion of the UI on the iPhone and iPad, and now it's just literally just around the edges. But hats off to whoever worked on those animations at Apple. Like it is some of the prettiest stuff I've seen out of Apple in a long time.
Yeah, and functionally, it does let you see the whole screen. And I've run into that before where I wanted to ask Siri something, but then it covered up whatever on the screen I was reading that I wanted to ask about, and that problem is solved now. So I think I say thumbs up on the UI. I think
Yeah.
great job, whoever came up with that and whoever implemented it. Is like Apple kind of at its best. But we're not getting all of the Siri improvements with this 0.1. I mean, there's in fact, the big Siri improvement isn't there yet. So, and that's one of the big questions to us, right? I think it's table stakes. If they don't fix Siri, then you can't call it AI,
Right. Yeah. All the stuff where Siri is supposed to be aware of your data, like in the keynote, they had the example about a flight or something, and it knew because of an email and an Apple note and a text message when your mom was coming in. That stuff is not there yet. Right now in 18 beta 1, 18.1 beta 1 and 2, that stuff is just non-existent. And maybe that's going to be in 18.1, or maybe that's going to be later this year or early next year. I'm not sure. When that stuff comes, we will spend time with it, because I think I'm just going to spoil part of my ending now. I think out of the entire bucket of Apple Intelligence stuff, the thing I'm most excited about personally is like Siri should know everything on my phone and like be able to answer questions for me because it has access to all that data. But not here yet. Still early days. We will report back, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's the dream, because something like ChatGPT is probably smarter than Siri, but it doesn't have access to your data.
Nor
And
do
if
I
they
want
can,
it to have access to all my
exactly,
data.
exactly. But this, we'd be comfortable with it because of all the privacy steps Apple's taken, but it still has to work. There are some things that have improved in the point ones. It understands you better when you make corrections. I did a couple tests. I've been doing a lot of tests, but like the ones I put in the outlines, I said, what's the weather in Phoenix? I mean Anchorage, and I said it in that way. Suddenly I changed my mind, and it gave me the weather in Anchorage. And I said, could you add read could you add watch Lord of the Rings to my reminders list? And it did that. It said watch Lord of the Rings. So it gets you a little better. And I think that's all happening probably on device. But that is just the tip of the iceberg for what we need from Siri. And it's not there yet. A couple other user interface improvements we're getting at this point. You can type to Siri by double tapping the bottom of the screen. I discovered that by accident, but I think it's going to be nice, because if AI, Apple Intelligence, is as good as they say, and we're going to be wanting to use Siri more, we're not always going to want to talk to it.
Yeah, I think typing to Siri is a huge win. And that has been there for a while, but it's sort of like a secondary mode, and now you can go back and forth. I like the tapping the indicator at the bottom of the screen for Siri. It does feel like there's a lot of stuff going on at the bottom of the screen now, because if you scroll down, you go into reachability, you scroll up, you get to multitasking. I have not internalized that gesture yet for Siri. And like you said, you sort of came across it. I don't know if there's a better way for that, or just going to take some time to get used to it. But it is nice if you have a big phone or an iPad or something, you don't have to go to the sleep wake button to get to it. But maybe it needs a little fine tuning.
Yeah, and the touch target could be bigger, because you really have to get it right at the bottom. So I think that needs tuning. Then there's the Stephen Hackett feature, and this was the one I was really excited about testing. And I want to hear from you, because I was doing it, because the idea is Siri can access Apple support documentation, so it becomes like a little portable Apple genius in your pocket, right? And if you have a question about any of your Apple stuff, you ask it. I would presume that they've dumped all that data into the neural engine, or it's on device.
Yeah, in the model somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And you can just, they fed it all their probably support docs, and then you can just query against that. But I've had no success with this. I said, how many ports on the back of a Pro Display XDR? Seems like a very basic question. It should be able to answer. It said, well, here's a Google search. You can go read it. And then I said, how do I save a Keynote file as a PDF? And it got another Google search. I don't know if that one's just not turned on yet. Were you ever able to trigger that?
No. Even asking things about my phone itself of like, how do I restart my phone? Like Google search, So I hope that materializes. It's such a good idea. It's something, and they took some heat for it because their implementation was weird. But with Bixby on Samsung phones, that was the original idea, was that Bixby would be an assistant, not for the stuff out there, but the stuff in here, the stuff on your phone. How do I restart my phone? How do I set my default browser, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera? And, again, early days, I hope that materializes because it would be great if someone could just ask the device they're using about how to do something on that device. Like, it's a pretty good idea.
I just don't think it's turned on yet. And as we record this, they just released beta 2, and I have not tested it with beta 2. So maybe I'll be proven.
I tried
wrong,
this
but
morning on beta 2 with our questions that have been in our document, and it's no change from beta 1, at least for me.
okay. All right. So yeah, I just don't think it's there yet. The next category is writing tools, and that's something I'm particularly excited about. I am a longtime Grammarly subscriber, but the downside of Grammarly is it's a web service. Like if you're doing a day one entry and you want it checked, Grammarly is going to read your journal entry, and I really like the idea of this being done on device. And Apple Intelligence gives you a very nice user interface, and it gives you the usual suspects. It can rewrite something for you. It can proofread it. It can change the voice. In the MacSparky Labs, we had a member who is a fancy business guy and said he had written an email that he was in anger. Sometimes you get mad, right? Somebody does something dumb, you write a mean email back. And he went and he's got the beta running, and he had it say, make this more professional. And he said it did a really good job of taking out, kind of the snark and making it a professional email. And that stuff is all built in. I think the UI is great. I like the way they've done it. My only critique of the UI is when you have multiple fixes, it's a little confusing as it goes through them to show them to you. It's not as, I think they could have used a few more pixels to make that more clear. But the basic feature is there, and it's on device, which I think is really good.
Yeah, I think the writing tools are the strongest part of this so far, and it makes sense. Like LLMs are good at that sort of thing. I will say things like Grammarly, which I also use and pay for, having been around longer, it understands like, oh, I put HTML or I put Markdown into you. Like the writing tools, at least. I've mostly used these on the Mac. If I have a blog post with a bunch of Markdown in it, it like kind of freaks out, like doesn't know really what to do with it. I should just ignore it or render it in the background, like know what it actually says. Maybe that'll come. It's new, but having it built in, seemingly on device, and I think in particular like your example, the tone shifting stuff is good and useful. My usage of Grammarly has never been that. It's always been check this for grammar, right? Check this for sentence structure and that sort of thing. And so I don't know if I'm going to lean into the tone shifting stuff, but the ability to like, hey, I have this Pages document or I have this in Mars Edit. I'm getting ready to publish it. Take a look at it for me without having to round trip to Grammarly, because I do not use Grammarly's Mac app, which does this weird thing where it like hijacks itself into all your text boxes on your Mac. It's super weird. I do use the Safari plugin because I write a lot in Neon, the CMS we have at Relay. But having it built in just behind a right click on the Mac, that's awesome. And so I think a lot of people will find the writing tools like genuinely useful.
Yeah, and like you, I'm looking to proofread. I don't want to change my voice. The lab story I thought was a good one with email because that makes sense in business, right? You want to just change the tone of the email, but for the kind of stuff you and I publish, we want it to be our voice. So I did an experiment. I took I think it was a blog post or a newsletter, and I ran it through the Apple Writing Tool AI, and I ran it through Grammarly. There was one absolute grammar error in the text. I'd like to say I put it there intentionally. In fact, let's just go with that. Yeah, I put it there intentionally. And Apple Intelligence found it.
Wow.
And said, hey, this is grammatically incorrect. You want me to fix it? Yeah, okay. And then I gave the same text on, I made 2 copies of it, and I fed it to Grammarly, and Grammarly caught the clear error, but it also had like 7 additional recommendations.
Yeah.
Do you want the apostrophe to be curly or straight? Here you are using the word really twice in one paragraph. You want us to get rid of some of that? Cleaning up. And I wouldn't call it changing the voice so much as just, some stylistic recommendations.
Sure.
And I use those. I guess that's where I draw the line. I'm willing to like have it like get rid of sometimes because sometimes I write like my speaking voice and that's not good. So Grammarly helps tap that down a bit. So my critique of writing tools, I like the UI. I think it's great. I love this on device. I think the touch is too soft. I think it could be a little more aggressive. I think that model could give me some of the recommendations that Grammarly does, but they choose not to. And it's just like, the way Apple is with photos, right? They want the photo to be natural. They don't want to be too aggressive with like, cranking up the contrast or whatever, like some phone manufacturers do. I feel like they kind of take the same approach to writing tools. And that's fine, but there's no way for me to turn it up. And if they could turn it up, if it could have made 4 recommendations to me instead of Grammarly 7, that probably would have been good enough for me, But I would like to get to a point where I don't have to send my words to the cloud for grammar check. And this model seems like it's near or close, but they have kind of put a governor on it, or they've reined it in more than I would like.
I wonder if there'll be a future, because I know Grammarly has this. If you go into your settings in Grammarly, you can tell it kind of what you want. So you tell it, do I use the Oxford comma or not? Or do I care about passive voice? Some people write in passive voice and do that to great effect. Like, I wonder if there's a world where Apple will open that up a bit more and let people customize it. Because right now everyone's kind of getting the same thing, right? You don't have a lot of control over it. It'd be interesting to see.
Or even just like 3 levels, level 1, 2, or 3,
like in Carrot Weather, friendly, mean, and homicidal.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that would almost be the way Apple does it. They're not going to give you the granular controls you get from Grammarly, and Grammarly is not going to be put out of business by this. But even if they could just give me a little bit more of a dial on this, that would be nice. I did submit feedback on that. Mail and messaging. Okay, so this is one that I didn't really understand from the keynote, I guess, but it's kind of good. Like when there's a couple pieces of it, but the first thing I noticed was in messages. When people text message you, and you know how it gives you proposed replies, they're a lot better now.
Yeah, they seem to be much better, and it's interesting too because like sometimes that's a really easy problem to solve. It's like, hey, do you want pizza or tacos? And like iOS for years would put up on the quick type bar, pizza, tacos, and let you like pick one. But it seems like, and I agree with you, it seems like it's better than it was. That has become much more mature and it understands more of the context. And yes, it still does the pizza or tacos thing, but it seems like it has a much greater understanding of like how somebody might actually answer something that's more complex.
Yeah. Now, in email, it does a feature where, and all the email features are not there yet. Like they talked about auto sorting, and that's not there yet. It does give you priority messages at the top, which I think are kind of hit and miss. And then it has the feature where it takes the emails in your inbox, and rather than give you the first 2 or 3 lines of the text the person wrote you, it attempts to summarize it for you. So when I first installed this, I was working on the outline that day. I wrote "big win!" point in the outline. And now I'm not so sure, because after using it for a week, the summaries sometimes are wrong. It's just not quite getting it right. And I don't know. I think it needs to read maybe like, especially if it's a reply, I feel like the summaries on replies are not very good. Maybe it's not allowed to read the source message, like the message you're replying to, but it just seems to get a little confused. I think the idea is great, to go through the inbox and see a summary of what the email contains. Because, usually the first line or two is, "Hey, Dave, how's it going?" And like, I don't know what this person wants from me, right? And if they could get the summary right, that would be great. But I feel like it's not quite there yet.
I agree. I have cooled on this in mail quite a bit part of it due to the errors, like just in preparation for this episode, I got an email from Eero, like Eero Protect, whatever, it was $180 a year, but the summary said $180 a month. Come on. Vastly
Wow.
different. Like, and it
Yeah.
should be able to like understand what price is over time. That feels like a basic thing to get right. I also have some emails where it just won't summarize them. So I have something in my inbox right now that I need to deal with for our upcoming St. Jude campaign, and there's just no summary to it, and I don't really understand why. And so I kind of I don't know how I feel about it. It can be useful, but there are also times where like I wish I could just see the preview, and really the same in messages. Messages also has that summarization, and I think the same problems exist there. There's also the additional weirdness in messages that it can't show you a summarized preview for pinned chats because there's no place in the UI to show that. And my pinned chats tend to be like one in particular. Boy, really summarization would be really useful here. So I don't know. There's some UI weirdness there. I don't know if long term this will be something that I keep on or not. And as a MimeStream user, I only have this on the Mac. And we had Neil on a while back on the show, and they were working on MimeStream for iOS. And over the summer, I just kind of thought, it's like, would this keep me in Apple Mail and not I not be a MimeStream user? But so far, again, we haven't seen all of the mail features yet. So far, there's not much here that's going to keep me in Apple Mail once MimeStream's available to me.
Yeah. And if you're listening, Fastmail integration from MimeStream would get me out of Apple Mail. Just saying.
Didn't you tell him that directly on the episode? I think you did.
Yes, I did.
I know he's heard it before. You're not the first one.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. I think these are on the right track. I think they're good features. They're just the implementation isn't there yet. But we are at the very first beta on something that I think has been made very quickly. I do think that this is really a kind of a boil the ocean thing, and people are working long hours to get this stuff together, and there's going to be mistakes, and it's not going to be perfect the first time. So the thing they ship is where we'll judge it, but I do like the feature. Right now, it's not working as well as I would like it to, and I'll leave it at that.
I want to talk about the reduce interruptions focus mode. It's powered by Apple Intelligence. It's similar to Do Not Disturb, but also it's not like that. So when you set it up, it has a lot of the normal focus mode controls, right? I always want these people, these apps. I never want these people or these apps. But all the stuff in between, it looks at and intelligently tries to decide, okay, this is important. I should notify David about this. Or you know what, this isn't important. He can get it later in a summary or, at the end of the focus mode or whatever. I've been running it on and off. I will say, because my production Mac is not in the beta, because I have a job to do, I turned off the share focus across devices because my Mac was basically in Do Not Disturb all the time, which doesn't work for me during the workday. But I have found it to be pretty good. It's not perfect. But you're a bigger focus mode user than I am. So what has your experience been with this?
Well, I love focus modes, and mine are super tuned. So this isn't probably going to match the effectiveness of my focus modes. But like you, I've been running it, and I think it's somewhere between Do Not Disturb and, open season. And it seems the AI is working pretty good on it. Am I going to use it? I'm not sure, because I like the granular control I have over focus modes. But I've heard from plenty of people, many of them listeners of the show, that say, Sparky, you're crazy. I'm not going to spend an hour setting up all these stupid focus modes. Yeah. And for those people, you just turn this on and you're good. And I think that's who it's made for. So we'll see. But this one is in pretty good shape in the early beta, and I didn't even know this was coming, and I like it. Whether or not I use it is not as relevant to the fact that I think it's going to make focus modes a lot better for a lot of people.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of people, it'll be their first focus mode beyond just Do Not Disturb.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the photo and image tools were much discussed at WWC. There's not that many of them available yet. There's one that I'm aware of that I really like, though, and that is memory movies, custom memory movies. So we often at our house will watch those memories. If you open the Photos app, it puts memories together, and we've got so many photos in Apple Photos that it's fun. And it was for years now, it will generate them kind of dynamically in the background. We're like, hey, there's a new one. Let's watch it. And it's fun, right? But the AI implementation allows you to throw a prompt at it. So I did a couple. I did one like my dog outside, and it found a bunch of pictures of my dog outside and matched it to music. And then I did one of me and Daisy in front of the Disneyland Castle, because we have many of those pictures over the years. And it found pictures when we were kids. I mean, we've been together since we were teenagers, but it found all those pictures, put it together, set it to music. It took like a minute, and it built a dynamic memory movie for me. And it got me in the field, Stephen. What am I going to say?
Yeah, it's really cool because you can basically build whatever you want. There is a little bit of a wait. You said about a minute. That's been my experience as well. And
it's a minute, Stephen. Is that a wait? Really?
No, I know. Oh, look, I'm attention-addled millennial. What do you want from me?
All right.
But it does give you a nice UI as it's like building and bringing things in, which is also kind of like a preview. I agree with you. I think this is a winner. And in the new Photos app, which is kind of beyond the scope of today's episode, but memories, you can more easily toggle between show me the video and then show me the photos you pulled. And in a way that turns memories into like a weird smart folder. I don't know how to describe it, but it is really cool. And I think if you have the beta, or if, when you get Apple Intelligence on your devices, spend some time in this, because you can really get pretty nitty gritty. Like one of the ones I said was, build a memory for me of me fishing with my kids and dad. I didn't give it the names, and I have people, lots of faces set up in my photo library, and it did it. And it gave me this really nice memory of, fishing with the kids and my dad. And that's not a memory that Photos probably would have built on its own. The automatic generation tends to be more like birthdays and holidays and concerts and all that's great. But this lets you get really specific about what you want to see, and it kind of puts you in control in a way that the memories feature hasn't let you in the past.
Yeah, and this is kind of like the dream of Apple Intelligence, like using your data with AI to make something unique. And I feel like this is a sign of the right track.
Yeah.
And then there's call transcription.
Oh boy.
Which is so yeah, they added a feature where if you get on a phone call, you can push a button and it'll transcribe the call and give you a transcript. And Steven and I decided to do a little test. So we got on the phone and we had a phone call. I pushed the button, and it failed miserably. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, it was rough. We got questions about this, I think in the forums or maybe in an email. Like, how do you know you're being recorded? It does the thing Zoom does, where it's like, this phone call is being recorded. I was like, great, everyone knows.
Yeah.
We were on the phone just a couple of minutes. I think the file it generated for you, and I want you to talk about where that file goes, because I'm still not sure what actually happens. But the file basically cut off after 30 seconds, 45 seconds. It did not warn us. It did not tell us, oh, your recording has stopped. Like, it just failed in the background, right?
Yeah. And it missed while it was working. It missed entire sentences.
Mm-hmm.
It
also called you local, which was funny to me.
Yeah. It doesn't know my name, apparently.
Yeah. It can only be so smart. But so what happens to the recording? Like, where does it go? It transcribes it. Like, what's that process like?
It created an Apple Note, and it created a new category of Apple Note for recorded calls. And like a bozo, I deleted it, so I don't have the exact name of the category, but it's in Apple Notes, and it pops open and you can share it. And I shared it with Steven, and it has not only the transcript, it has the recording, the actual recording of the call. And in this case, the transcript didn't match the recording, and the recording cut off early. So it really just was kind of lousy. And, we're doing this show, gang, with the very first beta of this stuff. So for all we know, by the time this gets to the public, it could be great. But yeah, the transcription and summarization, at least at this point, is not, it's not really working.
Yeah. Not yet. We will revisit this one for sure once this stuff comes out. Because I do think I think this one in particular goes back to our thesis at the beginning that this is AI for the rest of us, as quoted by me and then you and then Craig Federighi.
Yeah.
There are other tools to do this, right? Zoom does it. We're recording in Zoom right now as a backup, and you can have that transcribed. But being built into the phone app on your phone, like that makes it accessible to more people. And having tools like this for the first time could be really useful to a lot of people. I mean, I remember in college, like there was a whole conversation in a class, like how do you record a phone call? Like not even the legality of it, which like I'm not an expert in, but it's like, how do you record a phone call? I'm telling you, in 2005, it wasn't a good way to do it, right? You had to have specialized equipment if you were doing it, and forget about it if you're doing it on a cell phone, right? And now it's just a button in the phone app. Like that's incredible. And a lot of people are going to find it useful if it works. And so this one, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt in these early betas, but out of everything I think we've tried, this has the most work that needs to be done to it. This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by KRCS, one of the oldest Apple premium resellers and your one-stop shop for all things Apple in the UK. For our UK listeners right now at KRCS, you can get 0% interest on any Mac over £1,000 for 12 months. That means you can buy the latest MacBook Air with the M3 from just £76 per month. You can make your Mac truly yours and have the exact spec you want with the pricing you won't find anywhere else. Or choose from popular models in stock, and as long as it's over £1,000, it qualifies for that 12-month interest-free credit. With free next working day delivery on in-stock items ordered before 3 p.m., there's never been a better time to get a Mac at KRCS, your local Apple experts. Get more information at krcs.co.uk/podcast or click the link in the show notes. 18 plus only, subject to approval. Terms and conditions apply. Please spend responsibly. Borrowing beyond your means could seriously affect your financial status, and ensure you can afford to make your payments on time by the due date. Once again, that's krcs.co.uk/podcast and get free next working day delivery on in-stock items ordered before 3 p.m. Our thanks to KRCS for their support of the show and all of Relay.
Okay, I feel like the original stuff we just talked about, the original release, the 0.1 stuff, is the low-hanging fruit. The harder stuff is yet to come. And let's just kind of summarize what they are. The first is the image-related stuff, Image Playground, where you can generate images, and Genmoji. I think you kind of put those two together, where it creates the Genmoji. It's funny because we've got notes to each other in the outline. I think both of us are very tepid on this whole feature.
Yeah, I have felt weird about the Image Playground stuff. So that's where you give it a prompt and it creates an image for you. And Apple basically has 3 different styles. They're all kind of animated, cartoony, hand-drawn. Apple's system is not for making deep fakes of the president, right? It's not.
Yeah.
It's for more common use. But even in the keynote, they were like, oh, draw a gazebo and like put it in your presentation. It's like, well, that's weird. I have felt sort of unsettled about this. And then I was listening to the 6 Colors podcast over the weekend, and Dan Morin was like, I hope they pull it. I hope they don't do it. And you know what? I don't disagree. I feel like creating imagery of your friends, because it has that capability, right? To like bring in photos in your photo library. And
well, not your friends, anybody that you have a picture of.
Yeah. And again, it's cartoony and animated. Like I have the superhero mom image in the show notes. Like go look at that. It's a good example of it. That feels so fraught with problems. Like I think about my two high school students who live in my house who, this sort of thing could be used for all sorts of bad things. Even though Apple's put really tall fences around it and it's not going to make a photorealistic image. Something doesn't have to be photorealistic to be hurtful. And I just worry about it. And so I don't know. The image playground, I just don't know, man. Genmoji's one thing, right? Created like an astronaut riding a dinosaur into the sun. Like, yeah, sign me up for like fun emoji things. That feels different than I've created an image that then I can put in iMessage or in a Keynote deck or in an Apple Note or wherever on social media. This doesn't feel good.
Also, I just personally don't think I'd ever use it,
No.
But maybe this is the type of feature that non-power users really latch onto. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say they should remove it, but I don't think I'd be disappointed if they did. So either way, you and I are both very, I think, uncomfortable with that. And I think Apple is going to have perhaps a lot more to deal with if they release this than they expect. But we'll see. Also related to images is photo object removal. That's not in it yet. I'm 100% down with that. There's third-party apps that do this already, but it should be built in where you can say, take that power line out behind, her head. So it's a nice clean sight line behind her in the picture, that kind of stuff. Yes, please bring that.
The Siri upgrades we talked about a few minutes ago, but basically on-screen awareness, contextual understanding, not present yet. I think that's the most exciting stuff about Siri, and I hope they nail it. I would really love it for my, voice assistant on my phone to really finally be on par or more on par with like an actual assistant. I'm looking forward to that. I hope that pans out.
I mean, that's the one thing I really want out of all this.
Mm-hmm.
The writing tools are cool, but Grammarly does a good job of that for me. But the Siri, there's nothing that could replace a powerful Siri on my phone that knows my data, understands anything I say, just think of the future of something like that, where I could say, hey, get a hold of Steven and see if we can move the recording to Thursday at 10. And I know that's not promised in this first feature, but I feel like that is where they're aiming with this. And they need to make progress this year on it. It needs to not be a joke. And if this is when I said earlier, take however long you need to do it right. This is what I was thinking, because this is the thing, right? This is the big one for me. Also not included was ChatGPT integration. We talked about that. That's not a surprise, but they'll get there. The inbox categories in Apple Mail, we mentioned that earlier, that it can categorize mail for you. I suspect it'll be okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing with it is, I think it's going to be limited. I rewatched the keynote on that section and looked at the screenshots. I think they've chosen categories for you. It's not like, you're going to be able to choose your own. Like I did a thing in SaneBox where I made them for like Max Sparky Labs, Field Guide, customer support, and specific topics of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it got pretty good at auto sorting mail for me. So I can, because the context shifts are what kill you, right? So it's like, oh, I got to do labs feedback, and then I got to do a field guide receipt, and it's like when you jump from different things, it's really rough. And having it auto sort for me allows me to avoid that. I don't think this is going to go that far, but at the same time, I don't know that it needs to, but we haven't seen it yet.
And then additional language support. Right now, it's only in U.S. English. There are plans to expand more languages. I can't imagine I just don't know. Like, how complex is that? Like, does the LLM have to be in Greek to have these features ship in Greece? Like, I just don't know. It seems complicated. So that's one to keep an eye out for.
This is again speculation, but maybe we got the on-device stuff with this 0.1, and maybe we'll get the PCC stuff, in the 0.3 or something, and we'll get more of this. But Apple, get Siri right. That's if I have one request from this whole episode, just get Siri right, please.
Amen.
Overall, what do you think?
I'm not blown away by any of it. I think what's there now, the best of what's there, are the writing tools. I think the summarization and some of those features I could take or leave. I just haven't made my final mind up yet. But I do think that the promise of like this is on device, it's the stuff, other than the photo memory stuff, which I get it. In my case, is crawling through 90,000 images. Um, it's fast, it's responsive, all that stuff is promising. So I think the promises are still here, and I feel like the beginnings of what we have are, even if they're not universally useful, they seem to be moving in the right direction. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but also know that none of the hard stuff is here yet.
Yeah. I just think overall it's all pretty modest at this point.
Yeah.
But it's the point one. It's probably the on-device stuff. I would like to see them turn the dials up a bit, especially with the writing tools. And they need to tune up some of these features that aren't quite there yet. But this is I think this is the easy part of it. Frankly, I don't know how to program this stuff. What do I know? But it just seems like this is the easier parts of it, and the difficult parts of the parts we have yet to see. And I do think Apple is going to be judged harshly if they don't deliver this stuff working. And I think they're aware of that. So it's going to be an interesting year.
Most definitely.
All right. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. Thank you to our sponsors today, 1Password, Squarespace, and KRCS. For more power users, stick around. We're going to talk about some serious AI. We're going to have ChatGPT write an Apple script. I want to talk about that with you. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.